painting tutorial. I'm Andrew Broussard. I have an 11 by 15 sheet of Stonehenge Aqua in front of me. If you are new to the channel, I start things off by saturating this paper and then talking about the plans for the painting while the water gets absorbed into it. This is a hake brush. It is the Ron Ranson hake brush. It can be found at Cheap Joe's Art Supply. I think Jerry's Artorama. There might be some other websites that sell it as well. I don't know if the Jackson Art Supplies in Europe has it. They might. But you know, it's a particular type of hake where the it's kind of a little pre-worn and it helps with different effects. Anyway, so I have a lot of ideas that are just going through my head right now for painting. The last video I did was of the lighthouse, and from that I had this grand realization that I can take that image and I could go ahead and start like changing it so that rather than it being a big old cliff, I can make it look like the edge of a little stream or something like that. And I was thinking about different ways to play around with that. And I think that's what I'm going to go with today, is having a cliff shape, but seeing how I can apply that composition to a different scene and making things seem small, even though it'll be the exact same size painted. The other thing is this combination I was playing with probably 2 paintings ago, which was the phthalo green and the quinacridone rose. So that one, we'd seen quite an amazing misty neutral that took place. So I thought that maybe as a background, I would utilize those colors for just a misty, soft background effect. And then from there, I thought that either I could take my other tonalist palette that I was working on, the sap green and Venetian red combination, and maybe build upon that as a closer object. Have almost like kind of 2 different tonalist neutrals approach. Kind of that purplish gray in the background and the brownish reddish green in the foreground. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that second one today, but I am definitely going to do this color in the background. So I had a little bit of just gunk on here. So this is from the previous painting. I put it on a separate palette because I was kind of running out of room, and I felt that I was going to develop a palette and utilize it on this. And the 2 colors worked so well together that I really didn't need to add anything else to it. That might change. I may start thinking about ideas that will make it look better, but I was so pleased with just the initial reaction and output that I got from it. So I'm going to put this gray in. Right now it's kind of on a greenish side. So you can push this back and forth, and that's what's really fun about it, is that if I grab a little bit of that quinacridone rose, you can see that change taking place. Kind of just toning the whole paper because I have a feeling that this is just going to be the whole background feel of it, and then I'm going to change my palette once I'm done with that background experience. Increasing the pigment concentration right here. So like I said, I had that idea of doing that shape in this object, the cliff shape, but having a horizon but with trees, and that would push that horizon closer. In the lighthouse painting, that horizon is far off, as far as you can see. So if you had a small shoreline back there, you'd barely be able to see anything. It'd be a bit thin strip. But if I make this larger, it makes it closer, and if I do that cliff the same size, it then shrinks it in perspective and makes it seem like a small little edge on a stream. So that's what's going through my mind with this. So this is kind of a tree line, essentially, in the background. Now, it could have been just a simple one and done type tree. It could be a little bit more going across the whole horizon as a complete background. We could potentially build up the darks more within it, but this is all just experimentation with it. And it's all just kind of theories from my head, so hopefully it works out, and hopefully it makes sense what I'm trying to describe to you all. We get a little too rich with the color, I think, and that richness might make it pop forward a little bit more. We'll see. And I'm going to bring it down as a shadow. And I could push paint around. Now, how this works with a different palette on top of it, I'm not sure if there'll be a good color harmony, but we'll see. A lot of my extent of color harmony comes from just having a limited palette. I'm not really sure what else allows color harmony to take place. I don't know if it's the color being present in everything, the same color, or what. Since I'm so super wet and wet, I can actually lift it up and move it around and get a different background effect. And I can spill some on this board. That's another fun thing to do when you're doing an out of focus background. Maybe we'll do a painting one day based solely off of that for you guys to play around with and experiment with. Okay, now it's time to switch palettes. I think we might have to come back just to add a little bit of darks when we do a dry off. We'll see. I noticed that this one did not have a devastating tonal shift for me, so like I said, I was very fond of that color combination. I'm going to wash off the brush and dry it off just a lower so I get more control over it. That's one thing that will throw people off with watercolor, especially the Hake brushes, that they hold such a large concentration of water, and that can be difficult to control. So I'm just doing a wipe off right here. Now this is kind of the critical point where I make the decision. Do I want it to be a sap green Venetian red playing around, or do I want to use kind of that standard Ron Ranson palette, the one that I used for yesterday's lighthouse? And the decision is to go with the Ron Ranson, okay? So I'm going to use the raw sienna, and I'm going to mix that with ultramarine. The raw sienna is Da Vinci brand, and this ultramarine is Da Vinci brand as well. When I mix those two, I kind of get a brownish gray for the rock tones, and need a larger concentration, maybe a little bit more water. Okay, now this is the edge of the cliff, but being put in as a as the edge of just a like kind of the dirt edge on a little stream. So it's pretty much the exact same size that I painted it yesterday, maybe a little bit larger, but also already with this imposing background, it's minimizing the scale. Now, This had darks and lights within it, and I'll talk about that in a moment, how we're going to utilize that and create that. We're also going to put in a little bit of foreground. Okay, so paper is still quite saturated. I'm still going to push colors in, create some darks. I could mix my burnt sienna with ultramarine. That'll give a neutral as well. And I could feed that in. And the way I had viewed just the cliffs and that edge was try to do horizontal, vertical strokes, and also try to, let's see, create darks on the sides that are facing me and lights on the side that are going to be more likely to catch light. So it's going to give kind of contour shape to it. As it grows, it'll vary in size, but ultimately we want it to grow wider as it comes closer. So that's the perspective aspect to it. And we can throw its reflection. And horizontal strokes will give us that curvature on the top of the bank, and we'll harp on that more in a moment as well. So this is just putting in just basic ideas. One thing I'm a fan of, and I always say it, Payne's Gray on a water's edge, especially wet and wet. I'm always very fond of that. And I could either take Payne's Gray and put that in some of these sides that are facing me. So I'm just kind of building up tones. I don't know what side is going to face me or not, but it's to give the illusion that I have sides facing me. And then we have kind of a wraparound right here. Since it's wet and wet, it's going to be very vague, but this combined with a more dry brush on top of it will make for a very interesting scene. We can also take lemon yellow into this mix, and I utilize that for grasses. I usually avoid lemon yellow, as you guys probably know. This is Van Gogh brand. And what I am going to do, because I had needed greens in my other one. You can get greens, for me, two ways with the Ron Ransom palette. The lemon yellow with ultramarine, or a lemon yellow with Payne's Gray. A little not as mixed as it should have been. So this is like the edge that's going to be overhanging. Okay, I'm going to push some of this water out the way, out the top. The reason I'm doing that is that I didn't want to get a creepy hard edge right there. And creepy is probably a bad word to use as an explanation for that. It just would have been uncomfortable aesthetically for me, I think. I just hit the tripod. I got to check it to make sure it doesn't flip the screen. Yeah, it doesn't flip it. Okay, so, putting a little greens in. It's getting brighter as we come closer and whatnot. I could create another landmass. By landmass, I mean just a little bank coming in right here. We lose it into the background. All right, Payne's Gray. Darken the base of the part that's going to be in front of us, because that's going to be lit from the back. we're going to have grass structures and tree structures up on here. Payne's gray along this guy's edge. One thing, remember, paint to the edge of the paper so that when you mat it, it gives the illusion of it extending past the mat and being more to the scene than just what's there. Stipple in for a little bit of texture. Okay. Now I'm going to switch back to the phthalo green, sorry. Even when I was posting online about this color combination, I kept on calling it phthalo blue. Making a big mix. This is gonna put wet and wet back here, and these are those tree trunks and whatnot that are in that far background. The goal is that it's so kind of grayed that it'll help it recede back. And since I'm doing wet and wet, it's going to soften it some more. I'd also thought, after playing with this mix and looking at it, there's a bridge on the I-10 that goes from Breaux Bridge to Baton Rouge in Louisiana, and it crosses the Atchafalaya Basin and all that, and they call it the Atchafalaya Bridge, I believe. And I was thinking, doing an interior swamp scene like I do, and then put the Atchafalaya Basin Bridge in the background, very soft like this, to set it in that swamp, in that bayou, whatever you want to call it, which would be really cool. That bridge goes for miles. And nobody likes driving across it. There's like no shoulder or anything like that, so I don't think there's a shoulder, so if there's like an accident, it always like blocks it up. I like how right here we had some drying taking place, and we get a mix of soft and harsh. And I could take a paper towel and add texture to these, which I might do. But I'm also kind of exploring more how this palette works with a standard palette on top. I could pull out some light in here. Pull out some lights on the water. Yeah, it's adding some nice texture. Let me see if I have a dry paper towel. I use the shop rags just because they're so absorbent, and they work well with watercolor and oil. It's funny, my friend who's into crafting and all that, she was like, "Oh, you like shop rags too? That used to be what I would get for my birthday," because her family knew that she used them a lot for crafting. Okay, so that puts that in there, and our focus is going to come back to the foreground. So we kind of put in wet and wet these ideas, and now we're going to build upon it and create the a little more definition in the front, so we get that push forward. I'm debating doing a drying off right now. There is one thing I want to demonstrate for you here and on the drying. Here's kind of Payne's gray mixed into here. I could put in a horizontal mark or marks like this, and then side stroke down with this rigger, and that's going to create that curve right there. This stroke in and of itself, I believe, and it's dry brush, is called the axe stroke in Chinese painting, and it's used to define rocks and whatnot, mountains, and that in the Chinese schools of painting. So that gives us a vertical movement. I had one job saying the right word out of two, and I messed it up. So it gives interesting texture. The rigger within just these two is invaluable. You can get a dry brush texture with the hake as well. I'm just doing it with this to demonstrate for y'all. I do this motion in trees and shadows and whatnot. I see other painters such as David Usher using that in trees and whatnot as a textural effect. So don't just use a rigger to just put lines in. But even though that is just a wonderful, beautiful use of the rigger, creating calligraphy type strokes, I mean, really makes it your own and puts your own personal feel into it. So that's the axe effect, the axe stroke in a wet painting. This I'd say is semi-wet. Here it's way wet. I'm not going to do it up there. It's just I might have actually done some up there, but to see the difference. So I'm going to dry off. I have to be careful since it's so wet up here. I might get some pushing around and some uneven drying, and I'm not a fan of that. So I'm going to lift up the blow dryer up higher for this. Okay, so let's go to town. Okay, so that's dry enough. Up here is still a little damp. If I make my way up there from the foreground, I'll come back and dry it a little bit. As you can see, there's a lot of marks in here. I definitely must have done that side stroke effect right there, because that's from the base hitting the paper and doing that damage in that fashion. So that's just to show you all that. Okay, so let's see. So we're going to build up on this. Now we have it dry, so we can add a different type of texture here. The concept that I'm keeping in mind is that this top portion is going to be more or less horizontal and then vertical when we come down here. Okay, this is more of that greenish mixture that I had on there. I'm going to have to put some darks and whatnot to switch things up. You can see we had quite a big drying shift in the foreground. That same stroke effect will give us foreground foliage. Just at a loss of words for today. I will have to come in and add a shadow for that guy at some point. All right, let's see. This is a raw sienna mix. You can see how we get that dry brush effect with it, and that's by controlling the concentration of the water in on the brush and in your mixture. Payne's gray to get some of those darks in there. But as you do this, you're going wet and wet, and then you start losing some of the textural effects. So it may take a pass or two to get the way you want it. You do run the risk of being overworked, but you know, just experiment with it. Do the spot and then move away from it. Go to another side. Kind of work the whole picture at once. So this is that Payne's gray mix, like I had said. Down here, I always like to get the base and texture with Payne's gray and whatnot. Get it kind of darker, since like I said, it's backlit. This gives just a little grass, and that makes it seem just like a small little ledge. We could put small little grasses and whatnot on it. We could put a tree coming up big right here. In fact, well, we'll do that tree last. Let's take this. Let's splatter some paint. Sorry. Trying to create that curved feel right there. And then it's going to come down dark. Then we hit the water. And we got its shadow and its reflection. All right. I have a habit of, when I'm using the rigger in this fashion, to scoop up water out of my water cup, get right into a little bit of the paint, and spread it around. Okay. So now here we could take this and put little grasses in, like I'd said. We could put tree structures, give gestures. You get more defined, larger grass structures in the front. And we could create a tree over in this spot. So let's do that tree. Ultramarine, raw burnt umber, I think I might put 2 or 3 trees in. It's a little grouping of tree / bushes. Feeling like this is pretty moody, so we'll kind of just go grayish with the foliage. So this is just kind of Payne's gray on the hake. But really need to darken the area around it. And I could blend it into this dark and have kind of a mass effect of a dark mass. Burnt umber. Ultramarine, that gives me dark. Add some Payne's gray for the black aspect. It kind of helps tie this foreground into this, and then it recedes back a little bit. I'm going to grab a little Payne's gray just to create the shadow. A reflection of that. Scrape out a little bit of the base, give a little highlight on this trunk. Get a spot of interest right there. These trees dried quite light. I think next time I would use a nice black to go along the edges of that, but this time I'll just use my mix. Now, going back over tree trunks and branches, you want to not trace over those same branches. This will create a depth, because the lighter branches will seem to go further back. The darker that you put in, even though they're going to dry a little bit lighter, will push forward as well. So it's a good little technique to get a little bit more out of your trees. And you can use that sideways effect, that dry brush, for foliage as well if you'd like. Something coming off the edge. I know that's going to get covered up, but to create the scene, I need that there. I think that having something defined in the front right here will take care of this whole side and make it interesting. You could add like ducks and stuff in this water. In fact, it's an interesting idea. Are we dry? I'm gonna have to dry for that. One time we were out duck hunting, and we were sitting there And my friend's like, wait, that's not one of our decoys. And yeah, it was just he was just chilling there, the duck. Put them in, put their little reflections in, little beaks. We don't have to go too crazy. I haven't put a duck in a painting in a long time. They'll sit there, they'll put their heads in the water, they'll do different things. This is just give the illusion of a duck. I'm really not going too much detail. It's just a little bit of shadow, a little bit of tail, a little bit of head. And what we can do is maybe get some to fly out. I've never gone too much detail on a flying duck, so let's see. Just trying to soften it a little bit. Try not to dab the whole thing up because that'll really bring up quite a bit, but they do have weird bodies. And when we were duck hunting, and there'd be different ones, different birds flying around, and you'd be like, oh, there's this, bunch of ducks, birds, and there's a whole bunch of different things that fly around. There's the morganzas, I think, the cormorants, they call some of them. I think that's a name. And I think my friend had said you look for the blinking ones. They look like they blink with the way they flap in the sky. There's going to be ripples in the water and whatnot. That's enough. I mean, we get the idea that there's ducks there. Let me do a little more in this foreground. I could add that lemon yellow. And even though it does push into like a sickly brownish color, it does give a feel of the grass in a blind and whatnot. And during hunting season, during the winter, during that time, the grass and the reeds and whatnot, we could just accentuate it with more Payne's Gray. I don't know how long this video is. I feel like there's a lot of experimentation taking place, a lot of different things. I have to get to dry flat. Put a little bit of this in here. Add a little bit more freshness. I think it might be time to wrap it up. I'll dry it off and I'll put a mat over it and sign it and see what y'all think. Move this out of the way. Get the blow dryer going. think we're dry to see good enough. Let me sign right in here. I hope you enjoyed. Keep in mind, I have links down below. Please like, subscribe, follow. If you have any questions, comments, please ask them, and I'll try to answer them in a timely fashion. I have links down below to the Etsy site, and I also have links to the Patreon account, which I would love for you to consider joining if possible. If that is not possible or you're not interested, that's totally fine. I appreciate you watching, and I'd love for you to continue watching and interacting. Here it is underneath the mat. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you all soon. Have a great day.